Putting up a wreath for a special season does not have to be something you always just buy pre-made. Sometimes you can make it yourself and it can be fun. Let me show you how I make one. So today's a little bit different. We're in the kitchen, but we're not gonna be cooking, but we're gonna be cooking up something kind of fun, which is a wreath. I don't do as many craft projects really anymore, but I think what's fun is we can still do some of them. You just don't have to overthink them or worry too much. I think wreath making especially can seem like, I can go buy a wreath. Every store has wreaths. It can, but if you wanna make it extra special, or like me, you want a bigger one, you can then put it in a large space outside or on a big wall inside, whatever works, and it has a big impact. If you were gonna go buy a large wreath like this that you actually liked, it'd be super expensive. But if you make your own, it's a lot more cost effective. It's kind of fun, takes a little bit of craft time, but once in a while, we need that reprieve. So what I have here are all the components. I have a wreath. You could use also, a different type of wreath if you want. This one, just to me, it has a natural look. It looks well in the autumn with that fall kind of autumnal color. And I have all the different things around me. So these, if you watched a reel recently, I picked from my limelight hydrangeas. They've been drying. And you could preserve them with like a matte, polyurethane spray or something. I just kind of leave them natural. They won't last forever, but that's okay. And then I have some different items here, some of them preserved, some of them faux, some of them real. We have some faux berry type fall look, some faux straw flowers they look like, and then some leaves. And these are all weather, these things. And the only reason you know that is you can find a tag. It says weather resistant. Now this will go under a covered porch, so I'm not too worried. But you wanna look for different elements that have different sizes, different textures, and kind of fit the colors you're going for. Obviously this is autumnal. It's fall. And so I'm picking things that have those colors to them. And I really like how these have hints of green, but then they have kind of a dried color. When you go with dried things, preserved things, they're really all gonna pretty much work together. Even some, it's like pampas grass fronds, which are just kind of fun when they go to the top. And what we're gonna start with is our base. So instead of going around the whole wreath, which you can do, I'm actually gonna go around about half of it and have it kind of at an angle. That's a personal preference, but one, I think when you don't go around the whole wreath, it's a little bit easier on you to embellish kind of from a center point and work outwards. And it also kind of gives your eye a chance to be reprieved on the side that has nothing, but then really focus on what you're gonna put on it. So we're gonna start with the larger pieces, and sometimes you kind of just wanna map it out. So I'm gonna start by laying some things out before I actually do anything, make anything secure. I wanna kind of just lay them out. And what's nice when you work with faux things like this, or dried things that have been made into things to use outside, you can manipulate them. So these are on wire, so I can kind of just sit here and see how I'm gonna like it. And then what I like about different textures is these are very taut and very rigid, but then you have something like this that looks like feathers. It's completely fake. But when it dances in the wind a little bit, but it also fills in some gaps. So you again have the ability, since it's metal and on wire, to open it up if you want to, spread it out, and you can start just kind of layering a little bit and seeing this is what one side is gonna be like, then we're gonna go the other route and go another side. And I think that kind of just gives you this ability to have fun with it, and you can kind of start playing with your colors and seeing what you wanna go with. So that's kind of what I'm doing here, is mapping it out, and then we're gonna start securing it. So I have a very rough concept at the moment. You can see I've cut nothing off. It's all just like laying out here. But what I wanted to do was kind of map out what I'm doing. I think this is really smart if you have no idea what direction you want to go, to lay things out. Don't cut anything, don't do anything yet, because this gives you the ability to change things up if you want to. So I have it mapped, and now what I want to do is start securing some of them. So I'm just going to take them back off at the moment. Nothing is set in stone, and that's what's great about this. But what I want to do is now start actually putting the things in there. And I can see one difference I wanted when I mapped it out was, I want this behind this green, because the green fades in a little bit too much to this, and I want to start with one of these. So what we do is we have a really long piece here, and you could work quite a bit of this in, and I probably will end up working most of that in, because what I have is, I'll show you here, a wire cutter obviously, but I have wire here too. Low gauge on a paddle would work well, whatever you have. And the idea is just, I'm not gonna be using hot glue because the strings that come off of it, especially on a grapevine wreath, they kind of get intertwined, doesn't work the best. But what I wanna do is, since these do have a nice wire piece, on a grapevine you have the ability to work that into the vines and kind of hide it underneath. And that's gonna give you the most secure ability. Now, if you wanna use as little wire as possible, you can even take pieces of whatever you're working with. Like this is wire. So I can actually take pieces of this and work it down into the grapevine wreath itself, if you see what I'm doing here, wrap it around, and that's gonna secure it too. So you don't always have to overwire things, but what you can see is great about these feather-like plumes is that they just kind of fall where you want to. And so when I hang this up, do you see how those will kind of have this fun thing where you can manipulate them a little bit, but then also just kind of flow and fill in gaps? That to me is the fun part. So I'm gonna start with that, and then I'm gonna go to the other side and do the same thing, because I kind of want them to mimic each other from a central point and work outwards. So we're gonna just cut the other one. Again, work it into the wreath, which you can tell as soon as I'm doing this, it blends in really well. And that's what's great about this. You don't have to worry always about using the wire, because I like wire, but one, that can be time consuming. And this really isn't too bad to just slowly work in. So once I have my beginning points, which again, central point working outwards, I'm gonna start layering in things like these greens and do that on both sides and then keep working outwards. So you can see here that I've worked and have two sides that are equal at the moment. Now I kind of am buying things usually in threes when I do it, because odd numbers usually are more pleasing to the eye. So this is an odd number now of this plume that I'm cutting off. And I'm just cutting off with that wire cutter, and you can manipulate it slightly to fit the curve of the wreath. And you can see here, I want this one to lay kind of here. So I'm gonna have to work it back a little bit further. So I'm just working this inside of the wreath. The grapevine are tight enough that this long wire, if I can work it in, it really becomes extremely secure, and that's exactly what you need. You just want it to be super secure, so where it is, it will just stay. And then I can open it up, and you can rough this and fluff this outside too. But I think sometimes each layer we put on is good to kind of just roughly look at it. And see here how there's a big piece of the grapevine I was sticking those things through? I'm even gonna stick this long piece at the top through there, because then what that will allow to do once it gets to the top is pull it out, and now it's really secure. So now you can see how I'm uneven in the sense that I have kind of a central point where things are growing or branching out of, and it goes off now on both sides. So now we can start embellishing with some of the fun stuff. So we have some textures with these plumes of the grasses, like I was saying, and we'll start sticking those in. And it doesn't mean we won't necessarily always put them back behind too, but again, these are gonna be the same way. These are more brittle, so you wanna put them in, after your heavy duty stuff, because up in here where these are actual plumes, so they'll actually just break off if you put them in too tightly. So you wanna start working them in, and I'm only putting them behind so I can hide, again, their wire. And notice here, these are gonna be a little bit more taut up here. I don't want these to be bent because they're real. So you have to allow them to kind of fall where they want to. So I'm gonna put a couple of those in, and I have a couple different colors of them too. And then once we get all the plumes in, we'll start and embellish with some of the fun stuff. I saved the last of the three of these leaves to put in because I like the idea of layering, repeating things. So there was one of them here, there was one of them back behind here, and I wanted one at my center apex to kind of pull these two sides together, which are kind of intertwined and flowing out from each other. I know this is gonna sound very ethereal and over the top, but in my mind, I need to create stories as I go, and that's what I'm doing. And I think also, I don't really figure this out till I go and do it. I wasn't testing this before I got on here and started filming it. But I think that's the point. You can't overthink something like this. You just have to have certain supplies around. You may not use them all. I never know for sure. But as you're starting to form it, I think it'll start coming to you. It's getting that artistic side kind of just going and flowing and starting to feel into it a little bit. You know what the important thing is here? Don't feel stupid. All those times if you were made fun of in life for doing weird things like this, don't think about those things. Don't feel stupid right now. Just have fun, be by yourself. Don't care what you think someone else will think about it. Think about what you want it to look like and have fun with it. So now we can start worrying about some of the fun stuff, which are embellishments like this. Now, what's great about these two, when I cut off some of them, this little piece you cut off of wire is great to use for this. It's already wrapped in that floral tape. So it's great to use either if you need to secure pieces or whatever. But now these are just embellishing. So these are literally just gonna go in here kind of towards some of the center and be just little pops of color. Do you see how those are little pops of color? And I wanna make sure I get that wire, there we go, in there so then you can even manipulate those further. And that's kind of the fun part, is starting to be like, what kind of manipulation will make this actually be more pretty? Where do I want color? And this is why we make these ourselves at home, is because then you can use the colors you want, which is important if you ask me. And I'm even using some, aren't these pretty, as just, these grow in the ditches here, but I didn't go get ditch ones. I think they're protected actually, so I don't go and cut them. But I do find some every so often like this to purchase. and you can just cut them. They're a little brittle, but they just have, I mean, that instant fall look to them, and that's what I like. And you can, you know, I'm not gonna put a bow on this. I don't want a bow on this. This isn't, to me, the look I'm going for of a bow. Instead, I want it to all just have the center part that it comes from and have a whole bunch of these fun extra pieces come out from that center point. We're just gonna keep adjusting, keep adding, and eventually we'll be done. So the more whimsical pieces, the pieces maybe you don't want to buy as many of, usually they're more expensive, or they're just kind of airy, I put in at the end because they fill in the weird spaces where they kind of just flow out from. And I know that sounds a little weird, but it's true. Sometimes weird is true. And again, these are kind of brittle, so we put them in gingerly, but what you do is when you place them inside, you can see they have this ability to just air, they're just like very light and they just fill in, and that's what I love. So we have most of the pieces kind of in here. You can see what we're doing, I think you can see, is we're gonna hang it like this so it's off center and it's kind of coming out from these sides but still intertwined and overlapping. And I actually, if you'll notice, even kept so you see a piece of the grapevine right here. And that's kind of important because I like the idea that you're not trying to hide what this is on, you're actually using it and making it a part of it. So what we'll do though here at the center is just put a few of these hydrangeas. Now, like I said, you could preserve them. My thing is, they're at the end. This should last a few seasons. Since it's under a covered porch, I'll bring it in after fall when I'm moving to Christmas. But if I have to replace, you know, the hydrangeas maybe next year, that's okay. I'm not gonna feel bad about that because these are free, they're from the yard. And you know what? A lot of this stuff, if you wanted to, you could forage for it. So you could go out to a timber area, you go out to your yard, you could find grasses in your yard. Anything you forage for, and if it's not fully preserved, it may not last forever, but it will last a season and you'll be able to enjoy it for that season. And to me, that's more what matters, is just being able to enjoy it for, you know, a season or two, and then you can kind of remake it. So I'm gonna put a few of these in here at the end, picking ones that have enough of a stem. And like I said, if you want to, you can just wire them in, build them out from the center. And then what we're gonna do for the top, I'm not quite done with that bit. I wanna show you. This piece of wire I cut off, it's coated. So I have metal siding and I don't want it to scratch. Even wood siding I wouldn't. So I'm gonna make a loop with it. And this is how we're gonna attach this to the wreath. And this is then what we'll be able to hang it with. So I'm gonna twist that. Here's my hanger now for a nail. And I'm gonna wire this part to the wreath on the backside so I can hang it up. So I'm gonna finish by putting a few more hydrangeas in, and then I think we should take it outside together. You guys can come with me. And we're gonna hang it up. I don't have food to taste, so we have to hang something. I just hung the wreath up. You know, it fills it. Obviously I had a large wall, so you could do this any size you wanted. It'd go quicker if you did a smaller one. And you can see now here at the centers where it went out, and I put a few more hydrangeas in once it was, you know, sometimes you have to put them in the place to know what all you want to finish it with. So even if you had more of the wispy things or more grasses you wanted to add in. But what I like is that it's a little unique in that it's off center, which we see a lot of wreaths now are. It's a little bit more modern that way, not as traditional. And the whole wreath isn't encompassed. Instead, we have these big arrangements. And they kind of just really, though, center you and bring you back to that circular idea, which is what I like. So that's Wreath Making 101 with Caleb. I don't know if it really gives you any insight, but what it does do, it gives you hopefully inspiration. Inspiration that anybody can do this. It's just about embellishing. It's also knowing how much to add, but also when to stop and when to edit it out, because that's important too, is not going over the top and adding too much. So I hope you're excited about it. I hope you have fun with it. And the important thing is, I hope you enjoy the season, because that's the whole point. Enjoying the season, even if it's just for yourself, it's worth it.